Hi, I'm Ava. I'm a Girl Scout in Troop 28332 from the greater Atlanta area, and today I'm going to be showing you guys how to make a fidget quilt for Alzheimer's patients. This tutorial is part of my Girl Scout Gold Award project, Aid for Alzheimer's. If you'd like to know more about my project or how this fidget quilt can help Alzheimer's patients, go ahead and visit my website at aidforalzheimers.weebly.com. I'll have the link in the description. Let's first go over some of our supplies. The first thing that you're going to need is some fabric for your backing. This has been cut 1 foot 7 inches by 1 foot 7 inches. The next thing that you're going to need is some batting. So I use the Quilter's fusible batting, which is a lot easier to use. This has been cut 1 foot 3 inches by 1 foot 3 inches. The next thing is a piece of fabric for your pocket. So this one that I'm using right here is embroidered a little bit to give it some texture, but if you wanted to use any other fabric that you have lying around in your house, that's completely fine. Just try to use something that has a different texture than the rest of the fabric going on your quilt. Next, of course, we need some quilting blocks. So my blocks that I'm using today are 5.5 inch by 5.5 inch blocks, and we're going to use a total of 9. I did set one aside because it was drawn by the Girl Scouts in Troop 18529. I'm going to make sure that that is the center block for our quilt, and I'm not going to put any fidgets on it. These are optional, but I think it's really great to be able to personalize your quilt. So I just have a small piece of white fabric right here and a fabric marker. This is going to be used to write a cute little message for whoever is receiving your quilt and sew it onto the back as a label. The last thing that you're going to need are your fidgets. So I'll go over in a little bit more detail what fidgets I'm going to be using today, but you can always go onto Google Images and look up fidget quilts to get some ideas for some good fidgets for your quilt. First, we're going to make sure that all of our fabric is washed and ironed. So my fabric right here is been washed, but I'm going to go ahead and iron it one more time just to get out all of the creases from it being folded and packaged. The next thing that we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and lay all of our blocks out and determine where we want our fidgets. So I like to use this guide, which you can find on my website, for determining where my fidgets are going to go on each of my blocks.
Since I'm using this fidget quilt overview, I'm going to refer to each of the blocks with their corresponding numbers.
So this is block 1, this is block 2, block 3, block 4, block 5, block 6, block 7, block 8, and block 9. Once we've determined where all of our fidgets are going to go, we're going to go ahead and sew our fidgets onto the blocks. I'm going to go ahead and start with block 2. For block 2, I'm going to be putting beads on some elastic string and then gluing it down to the different sides.
Like I said, all I'm doing is tying a knot on the end of a piece of plastic string and stringing on some textured glass beads. Before I make the knot on the other side of the string, I'm just measuring roughly how long the string is going to need to be to reach both sides. I'm now repeating these same steps for a second strand of beads. To attach the strings to the quilt, I'm hot gluing the sides down as closely as I can to the edge of the block. When we sew the quilt together, these sides will be secured in the seams.
For block 3, we're going to sew our pocket on. So like I said, this one has been embroidered, but you can use any different type of fabric that you'd like. If you wanted to, you could use this soft fabric right here, or even minky fabric, which I found works really well for different pockets.
I've already gone ahead and ironed down the top 3 sides of the pocket, so I'm going to go ahead and sew down the top seam of the pocket. Once this seam has been sewn down, I'm going to pin down the bottom 3 sides of the pocket to the quilting block. Now I'm going to sew the 2 pieces together. Here's our final pocket.
Block 6, what we're going to do is we have these 3 different buttons right here, and we're going to take some scrap fabric that we already have, and we're going to sew the fabric together and make a little loop that can go over our different buttons, so that way it can be latched onto the button and then unlatched accordingly.
I'm going to start by determining what spacing I want between my buttons. As you can see, I decided to only use the 2 larger buttons. Now I'm taking my fabric and eyeballing about how long my fabric latch should be and cutting 2 strips of fabric. I'm going to repeat this step on the other side. These 2 pieces will be sewn under the buttons to give the block a more finished look. To make the fabric latches and straps, I'm first folding all 4 pieces of fabric hot dog style and face together. I'm going to sew along the line I've just made with my pins. Now that they're sewn together, I'm going to iron them as demonstrated here so that the seam is in the center of the fabric as opposed to the side. After ironing the fabric down, I'm going to sew along the tops of the fabric. Now I'm just cutting off the excess fabric and flipping them right side out. I like to use scissors to help poke out the corners of the fabric. After everything is right side out, I just iron the fabric down one more time. Now I'm going to cut out the holes for our buttons on the first 2 pieces of fabric that we're using for the latches, and then I'm going to sew around the holes that were just made. Before I sew down the buttons, I'm first going to pin down where I want the pieces that are going on the opposite side of the latches. Once I pin them down, I'm going to sew them onto the block and then stitch on the buttons on top. Now I'm going to sew on the latches. To do so, I'm putting the button through the hole I've made and pinning down where I want to sew. I did leave a little extra length on the latch so that way it'd be easier to pull around the button.
For block 9, I have 2 different types of fabric. So I've got this animal print soft fabric and some felt. What I'm going to do is I'm going to cut out different shapes with these 2 different fabrics and sew them down pretty much however I want. So for the felt, I'm probably going to cut out some leaves, and then with the animal print, I might cut out some hearts and sew it down like that.
What I decided to do was to cut out 2 leaves out of the felt and a heart out of this soft cheetah print fabric. Once all the shapes are cut, all I'm doing is pinning and sewing them down.
For block 8, we have this really pretty purple ribbon that matches some of our quilting blocks.
What I'm doing with the ribbon is measuring 3 strips that will stretch diagonally across the block. Then I'm layering them to create some texture. Once I've sewn the 3 pieces down, I'm cutting some smaller pieces that can be folded over and sewn next to the 3 strands of ribbon. After all the ribbon is sewn, I'm hand stitching on some pre-made mini roses to cover up where my last stitches were made. For the last 3 blocks, I'm going to be putting on a zipper and this piece of beaded ribbon. To start, I'm sewing the blocks together, making sure to keep the faces together as I sew. After I've sewn them face together, I'm going to iron them down so that the seams lie flat. Now I'm going to sew onto the zipper and beaded ribbon.
Now that all of our fidgets are done, let's go ahead and sew the quilt face together. These 3 blocks are already sewn together, so we're going to do the same thing for the next 3 before we put it all together. To finish our quilt face, we're just going to sew the 3 pieces that we've just made together. Now let's work on our label. I already wrote my message, AIDS for Alzheimer's 2020. What we're going to do is we're going to iron down very much similarly to the pocket that we made. We're just going to iron down these sides really quick to get a nice, even and sharp seam. Now sew around the tag so that way it attaches to the quilt backing. The next step is to just layer our batting and our quilt backing under our quilt face so that way we can go ahead and start pinning things down. Now I've layered our quilt backing, batten, and quilt face together, and I'm going to go ahead and pin it.
You want to make sure to fold and iron down a small portion of each of the sides of the quilt backing to make sure you have straight lines lining the quilt. If you haven't cut out your batting, this is when you would want to do so. To make sure the batting will get sewn with the 3 layers, you want to cut your batting either to the same size as your quilt face or a little bit bigger. The larger your quilt batting, the larger the perimeter of your quilt will be. As you can see, my batting was about the same size as my quilt face, so my perimeter was small. To pin the 3 layers together, I'm first folding each side of the back over the 2 other layers and pinning them down. For each of the corners, I'm cutting off some of the excess fabric and folding down the back into a triangle shape. You can also leave the corners to have a square corner. Now I'm steaming together the 3 sides to ensure that the batting doesn't move while I sew the layers together. To finish the quilt, I'm going to sew along the perimeter as close to the quilt face as I can to ensure the batting is sewn in place.
Thank you so much for watching my fidget quilt tutorial. If you found this information useful and ended up making a quilt, please email a picture of it to aidforalzheimers@gmail.com. If you want to know more about my Gold Award project, visit my website at aidforalzheimers.weebly.com. Thank you!